Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Two Dads, One Car, where we talk about modern fatherhood. My friends, I am really excited about this episode because this is someone I've been following on YouTube for many years. His name is Daniel Titchener, and he does architecture, design, all that gambit. I'm sure you've been in a situation when you moved into an apartment and you're trying to figure out how to rearrange your furniture, how to add things, maybe from IKEA to make your place look better. Well, Daniel is an expert about this, and on top of that, he is a father to a 3-year-old daughter. His videos are fantastic. I'm sure you've seen them as well. And the coolest thing is that he actually lives here in Vancouver. And so kudos to my wife who gave me that nudge and to reach out. So Daniel, you are awesome. I can't wait to bring you into the car. We're gonna pick you up very shortly and we'll chat about everything design, architecture, living in a new country, all that gamut. So follow his stuff. I'm gonna have a link in the description. It's some really good materials. And with that, we'll chat soon. Cheers. Daniel, I'm so glad you're in the car with me. This is unreal in a great way. I did a brief bio to you earlier, but why don't you just give us a snapshot of your family, like number of kids, rough ages, and we'll start with that.
Yeah, so we're a family of 3. I have one little daughter who just turned 4. I live with my wife, Nisha, who's originally from here, which is Canada, Vancouver, and I'm originally from London. So not only am I kind of a new parent, but also a new expat, I suppose, to Canada. And yeah, just kind of working away as a YouTuber.
I love it.
Meantime.
I love it. There's going to be so many tracks that I'm going to go down given this. One question I like to start off with is like, what is for you, like what's an unspoken truth about fatherhood? Something that's not shared as widely that you're like, I wish someone said this more often, like for you, like whether it's at this stage or in the early stages, like what's like an unspoken truth?
An unspoken truth about fatherhood. I think a lot of people don't talk about the sacrifice that's required for being a father, because this is something I've been experiencing with my career a lot recently as well, is that being a parent requires so much time. I didn't realize how much time would be taken away from me when I signed up to this thing. We were talking just earlier about what my schedule looks like, right? And so, in the mornings, you drop your kid off at daycare or school at like around 9 o'clock. You pick them up around 4. But that is a very compressed window of time to yourself to do the things that are important for your work and career progression and really the things that you hold important to your growth, right? But then outside of that, it's not just dropping your kid off. There's also, cleaning up, preparing them breakfast, preparing them lunch, right? It's like the trips backwards and forwards. And then not on top of that as well, there's the expense on your energy too, because then you're preparing dinner, you're tidying up, you're putting them to bed, you're doing bath time, right? So your energy is then also reduced too. So when it comes to like my career with YouTube, I realized that there was a huge productivity hit, like a massive productivity hit. And I think probably like as a dad, a lot of people, they like to talk about the positives a lot.
Yeah.
But I think that's one thing that is very easy to overlook before becoming a parent, is just how much of time for yourself you're going to give up. But on the flip side, what I will say is that there is nothing else more worthy to sacrifice for than being a dad. It's like the most incredible thing. And now, I think you look at the trade-off, and sure, I probably could have grown faster in terms of my career, my YouTube channel. I could have done so many other things, but really it's like, what's it all for? But at the end of the day, I realized for me, like family is just, in terms of fulfillment and happiness, which is what I think most people want, there has been nothing more fulfilling than growing with my wife in being a parent and taking care of our little daughter. So yeah, I think it's like sacrifice, but then also like it's such a worthy sacrifice.
That is so well said. And I think I'm so glad you touched upon it too. And you mentioned like growing. I mean, Daniel, like you have like 750,000 like subscribers. Like your videos get hundreds of thousands of views. So I think you're doing fantastic. I'm sure in the eyes of the external world. But I guess how do you carve out time? Because I'm sure to create and think of these ideas, like you probably need that space to think.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's quite hard. I think, again, going back to sacrifice, right? This idea of work-life balance, it just becomes even more complicated when you become a parent. So, finding the time to create videos is a lot less. But then I think because of that, there's a lot more pressure that the videos would perform well too. And I'm not sure that having the impetus and the driving force of wanting to be a better father and a better dad, it kind of, I don't know if it's like a North Star in terms of always trying to do things with meaning and not wanting to do anything that is just for the sake of, perhaps like wealth or status or things like that. But like, what is it that is truly meaningful to me and my family? And also like what would make my daughter proud, right? So, yeah, I suppose that's something in terms of finding the time. It's like you don't find the time, but in a strange way, what parenting does to you, I feel like it makes you better.
Yes, it kind of grows you and it grows your capacity, right?
Right.
Capacity for patience, to think, and to be fully present where you can, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you strike me as a very intentional dad and someone who, fatherhood is woven into the way, the fact you're here in Vancouver. You moved here, right? You're planning your life and time around like your child and that aspect of it.
Right.
Has that always been the case, or where did that come about?
Moving to Vancouver?
Or just being this intentionality of really wanting to be a great dad? Like curious to know, were there influences in your life? Was there something like growing up, you're like, I want to be like, I know it's a tough question, but just curious to get your perspective on this one. Because it could be very easy just to be like, I'll just truck along, or I'll just like, stick with architecture and just like grind it out at the big firms, make a ton of money, right? But I think you're intentional. In one of your videos, you talked about being intentional about your life choices, right? And being able to be there to pick up your daughter, right, from daycare and that aspect. So was there something in your life you're like, hey, this is what I want to do, or has that? Yeah, I'm curious to know.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, because I was just considering before you brought up that question, this matter of time, right? Before I was a dad, I would sink so many hours into video games.
Yeah.
Like it was just something that I just loved to do. And then even when I became a dad, I found myself doing it.
Yeah.
But there does become a point where you start to realize like, what actually am I doing with my life? Like my time has become so restricted now, and every decision that I make is going to have an impact on my daughter. It's not just about me, and giving up an hour or two of personal growth. It's like, it's not the end of the world. But now it's like, I give up an hour or two. That's an hour or two of time that I could be spending to support my wife. It's an hour or two that I could be bonding with my child. And so I think the intentionality, it almost came naturally to me as a father, because I've also been quite intentional about, how I choose to spend my time anyway. Whenever I see, I think I'm I'm a big stickler for inefficiency. Whenever I see an inefficiency somewhere, I think this, it's part of being a designer, right? It's like you see an inefficiency and you want to fix it. And so when it comes to, my daily life and now parenthood, I'm just thinking it's like, okay, I have these amount of hours. I'm inefficient in this area, this area, this area. This is something that I can fix and essentially improve my life, my daughter's life, my wife's life, and my own well-being, I suppose.
I mean, that's so hilariously sad, because I feel the same way too, right? You kind of like in the law field, you recognize that, okay, where are the obstacles? Like you hyper hone in on the details, right? Provisions, contracts, clauses, and it's like, ooh, okay, let me see. There's probably good things and bad things about it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
I guess how have your design principles adjusted since having a daughter? Like, do you feel that you've been able to like, okay, I'll just let this. I can only imagine like when you see like mess on the floor, you're like, oh my gosh, this is gonna. How do you balance that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think having this discussion is like I just feel sometimes a bit of a fraud on my YouTube channel because whenever you invite a guest over to your home, right, you tidy up beforehand. Yeah. So it's like when you're inviting 500,000 people into your living room, it's like I'm not gonna leave all of the mess out. But then on the other hand, it's like it doesn't look like that the majority of the time. There's always mess that comes around. Your energy levels are zapped. But yeah. Sorry, what was the question again?
But I was just thinking, how does one balance that, especially as a designer, when you look at the realities? Right. I'm sure when you see mess on the floor, you're like, oh, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
And I guess maybe giving yourself some grace and like, this is a real life.
Yeah. I think my view on design has changed a lot too. I think there's always like something that's always kind of guided my thinking towards design is the idea of form and function.
Oh, yeah.
And form is important, that's why we have art. There's a lot of joy that's derived from something that's very aesthetic, right? And beautiful. But then on the other hand, it needs to work.
Yeah.
And so as a parent, before I was a parent, it was very easy to have a very tidy, aesthetic looking living area.
Yes.
But when you have this, tiny human being that just does whatever they feel like, it affects the way that you inhabit space.
Yeah.
And so now I'm starting to realize that sometimes you need to consider mess and even integrate that as a part of the design. It's like leaving area and like space for it and inviting it in a sense, because it's gonna come. And if you fight against it, you're just gonna be miserable.
I think that's what it is. It's kind of you're like that in the Greek mythology, right? You're pushing the rock up the hill, right? And it's just gonna blow down.
Right. That's right.
I think that's something that I struggle with too, because when my daughter's born, like she's like a hurricane, right? She like goes in. I'm like, I just cleaned this 5 minutes ago.
Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah.
And you're like, okay, maybe there's like a degree of acceptance. They would just grab like a broom and like mop it to the side.
Yeah.
I mean, this is fun.
Right.
How, I guess, is there ways like, as parents to, I know you did a video recently about like rearranging the crib and things like that. Are there things that you have done as well now that you have a daughter to rearrange your apartment, or like aspects you thought about?
I think space becomes a lot tighter when you become a parent, because you just don't realize how many things that a child has, initially.
Yeah.
But in terms of the space that my wife and I had, I don't think it's really changed that much. We've allowed space for my daughter, but then it's like the amount of space that she takes up, there's this constant back and forth of how much do you allocate to yourself?
Yes.
And how much do you allocate to her? And I suppose when I first became a parent, I had this feeling where I was like, I need to give my daughter the very best, and I need to sacrifice everything I have, in order to make sure that she's taken care of. But there was a quote that I stumbled upon, which really hit hard for me, was that, and it says, happy, healthy parents make happy and healthy children. And that's when it all kind of flipped around for me, where I realized that if I make compromises and sacrifices in order to help my daughter or make her happy, or my idea of what makes her happy, that has a repercussion on my own happiness at times. Or there are decisions I can make, right? If I just make life hard for myself, by giving her unlimited space to play and unlimited, space compared to what we might have, that can have real repercussions on, not only my happiness and well-being, but then my wife's too. And so now I think I've kind of had to reel it back in a little and consider, what can I do to make my wife and I happy? Like how can we do things that make us happy whilst also ensuring that our daughter has the exactly what she needs to be the best she can be? And in doing that, I think we are better equipped to be better parents. There's an example that I like to use as well. Like when you're on an airplane, right, and there's the cabin is compromised and the masks come down. they always say you have to put the mask on yourself first before you put it on your child. And if you're not in the right space to take care of a child, you know, you've got a lack of sleep, you're hungry, tired all the time, right? That child isn't going to be cared for in the best way they can be. So there's this kind of to and fro where I'm realizing you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of your child too.
I think there's so much power in just what you just said there, because you're right. Like when happy parents end up with happy children, and then, you know, when you talked about that space allocation, right? Sometimes we may carry that resentment, and then they'll carry through, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And it'll be like, okay, wait a second, let me just reshape this.
Right.
Like what makes best sense for me, and then okay, I'll bring them in on the ride. It's like it's a nuance, right? But I think there's a lot of power in what you just said there.
Yeah. And I think also, you know, when you become a parent, you realize how strongly people think about what it means to be a good parent.
Sure.
So you have opinions immediately flying at you, left, right, and center, right? It's like, oh, you know, the child needs this, the child needs that. Oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And it's so easily very overwhelming, and it becomes very easy to live according to other people's expectations.
Right.
But, you know, and especially online, you know, you do, like, this is why I was saying, you know, you say anything about parenting or parenthood, and immediately there are opinions flying in the comment section.
Wow.
And I catch myself at times, I'm like, oh, really? Am I doing the right thing for my daughter by living this way? Or, you know, is this the right decision? But at the end of the day, you know, you have to do, I think that's the North Star. It's like, what can you do in order to be the best person you can be for your child?
This is actually a very unique and interesting perspective, and I'm so glad you're in the car with me, because it talks about, like, if for someone who's in the public, like yourself, like in a public figure, politicians, there's that side of it, but you're on the YouTube side, right? It's fascinating because you're right, there are so many different opinions and comments, and I'm sure you were probably taken back, like, whoa, wait a second here, right? And
Absolutely.
I could how do we as a community like counteract this, right? Is it just like kind of what you just said earlier, like how do I just understand, do right for what my daughter is, or maybe we give each other grace, or maybe there's it's so many facets to this.
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many facets. But I think this is why I think what I like talking about with design and how design can shape the way that you spend your time, like the way that you choose your home and the size of your home and how expensive your home is directly impacts the amount of time that you have, either for your work, career, or your own self-development and growth. And I think having a North Star and just kind of like what's that quote where it talks about, it's like, if you don't know to which port your ship is sailing to, no destination is preferable. Something like that.
Yes.
Do you know that quote?
Yes.
Something like that. And I feel that there's, like, by having like this one singular focus on how can I be the best person I can be, in order to give as much as I can, right? Because there's also this quote that I heard recently as well. I full of quotes today.
I love it. Quote episode. Here we go.
There's a quote that's like, you're not remembered for how much you earned, but for how much you gave.
Yes.
And I think really that's what, like, we talk about sacrifice, right? Oh, it's kind of like looping around here, like in terms of this idea that sacrifice, that's what you're remembered for. You're remembered for what you gave to the world, what you gave to others. I think you can only give if you have the capacity and character to help others in some way or other. And so I think that's really become a big North Star for me. It's like, well, how can I be the best I can in order to help not just my family, but, you know, those around me too.
It's really inspirational, and it actually reminds me, I did had to listen to your TED Talk while I was cleaning my house leading up to this, right? But I think that part is inspirational, because when we talk about, you know, there's a lot of talk about like legacy, right? I'm sure you have like worked on designs that has somebody's name on a building and whatnot. Yeah. But like, does that really matter, right? Maybe what I think what matters is legacy is like how our children think about us as they grow up, right? In the future, in that aspect, like looking at our own fathers and our own grandfathers, right?
Yeah.
That legacy is actually in our children,
Yes.
right? And what they think about it, and also the people we interact with.
Yeah.
That seems much more powerful than like the what's on a wall. Although that's distracting, it could be very alluring, though, right?
Yeah. I think, this idea of status is a big distraction at times to what really is the most important thing in life. I think it's easy to want to chase, riches or appear successful, but actually defining what success means for you is so crucial.
Yes.
And there's this, I think it's a short book. I have like the rough kind of synopsis of it like written down somewhere.
Okay.
But it's called the Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. I think that's the
yes.
name of
Yeah.
the book, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is in relation to how those who are dying, they reflect on how they spend their time. And it always comes back to, I wish I'd spent more time with those I loved. A lot of the time, I think I can't remember all of the 5, but that was the one that really hit home for me the most, is how you spend your time. And so now I think just time is just a huge thing for me, because I realize it's the most valuable thing that we have. I heard the other day, you would, when you are like 40 years from now, you would sell every single possession that you own in order to have the health and energy and life that you have right now. And so how you spend every single waking minute it's so crucial.
Yeah, it reminds me of like actually the book Outlive by Peter Tia, and he talks about like, when people are towards the end of life, like they spend all this money to add another 3 months. But what about the 3 years or 30 years before that? Right? And that's kind of where the impact is. I mean, if I could pivot the conversation, I'm just curious to get your perspective on this, because you did touch upon this on your TED Talk about your dad, right? How you actually didn't get to know him because he passed away. Was it before you were born or like around?
Yeah, I was 6 at the time.
Pretty early on.
Very early on, yeah.
Do you, I guess as you are now being a father, do you ever think about that? Do you ever think about what it was like for him to have you at this stage? And yeah,
I do often think about that, because my daughter, she's 4 now.
Yeah.
Right? And I think about the early memories I have of my dad, and they're really not that many. But I also consider what my daughter's life would be like if I wasn't around.
Yes.
And the impact that a father has on a child, because I think modern day, I suppose like divorce rates, single parenthood, and these kind of things, I have really come to value, I think, experiencing losing a dad at such a young age. And I think other people can relate. I think if you go through your parents having a divorce or anything, there's a certain element of loss involved. But the importance of having both parents there for a child, there's such an important function to be given by both. And I've just noticed how my daughter now responds so differently to me than she does to my wife.
Oh yeah.
Because I think mom is there, as the kind of like the comfort and the always, the kind of like the care. But when it comes to like play and like just exploration, the dad, I'm realizing the role of a father is huge.
Yes, actually, right.
Yeah. And just in terms of growth, right, and confidence, I think I lacked a huge amount of confidence because I grew up without a father, actually. And I only, after getting married, I feel like I developed some of that confidence that I had lost, I suppose, through childhood. But I consider that a lot, and how my presence in my daughter's life has a huge impact on me.
I think this is such a good tie-in, because like part of the underlying premise behind Two Dads, One Car is like, how do we support fathers, right? Like when I created this, I realized there wasn't that much any materials out there from the father's perspective, and quite often fathers are kind of like put off to the sidelines or just seen as like a nuisance, right? Like, right. And then of course moms are too busy to teach dads how to be dads, and that totally makes sense. But I think there's a value, like you said, of that play aspect, that dual side, because they both contribute to a stronger family.
Yeah.
Right? And you've seen that growing up as well too. And now you're seeing
Yeah.
it apply as a parent yourself.
That's right. And there's also, the interdependence, I think, between the two parents too. How well mum is doing in being a mum is directly impacted by how much dad is, being a good husband, right? So yeah, I think that it's all there, like parenthood, everything in life is just kind of wrapped into it, and so even relationship dynamics, all of those things, I realized how often my wife and I will, maybe have a disagreement or, a confrontation about something that is really impactful to my daughter. It's like, I realize I don't want my daughter growing up seeing discord between my wife and I. So working on, then that also incentivizes working on our relationship too.
Yeah, actually.
Right? And I think oftentimes it's very easy for parents to place the importance of the child before the importance of their spouse.
Yes.
But again, this idea, right, of sacrifice, sometimes by sacrificing too much for your child and compromising your marriage directly compromises the child. So it's kind of like a backwards law. It's like you focus. I think there is who popularized the backwards law? Was it Alan Watts? I can't remember. But this idea that when you try too hard on something, sometimes it can have the opposite effect.
Yes.
So by trying to give too much to your child, sometimes you can actually end up damaging them more because you didn't take care of the other important aspects of your life. Whereas just by taking care of yourself, taking care of your spouse, that has a huge impact on your child's outlook and their well-being too.
I'm so glad you're saying this. And see, the moms who are listening to this podcast, share this with their husbands. And I absolutely agree though, because I just had a flashback about my upbringing, right? My mom was all about sacrificing herself, for my brother and I. But at the same time, it strained the relationship with my dad, and they divorced in high school, right? It was not a fun time. Don't get me wrong, it was not a fun time, right? And definitely strained things for many, 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 many years, right? And so I think part of it's like, okay, how do ourselves feel happy? How do our spouses also feel happy?
Right.
And the downstream effect is our children.
Right.
Right. That is my takeaway from what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the child, by taking care of just the things that make you better, like your child. It's like, I think really it's like, I suppose, the better you become, the way I think, the better you become, the better your child becomes.
I love it. You're such a shining example, someone who's been able to kind of thread the needle, right? That we're all figuring out, right? We don't want to put anyone on a pedestal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely figuring it out.
If I could ask a personal question outside of fatherhood, on this entrepreneurship journey of yours on YouTube, do you have a team that's supporting you? Like, how do you create the ideas? How do you, like, all that aspect of it as a father, right? Or do you lock yourself in a room on a Saturday? It's like, I'll be back in 4 hours. Put the headphones on.
That is my biggest struggle right now. It's like this thought of perfectionism that I have in my head. It makes it very hard for me to work with other people.
Yes.
And I think I've always struggled with that because I have a certain idea in my head that's not clear. I want to convey a certain idea or thought in a video, but then it's not clear. I find it very hard to work with other people, and a lot of time there's this element of discovery that will just happen as I work, but it ends up being very slow. But then at the end of the day, it's like, it's this thought again, am I trying to just churn out content for content's sake, or am I trying to do something meaningful? And I think when I look at a lot of other creators who have gone before me, the ones where when you look at metrics in terms of success, you see numbers, right? It's like, it's very easy to think, oh, this YouTuber is better than that YouTuber because he's bigger. But actually, what I try and do now is I try and consider, it's like, who's more fulfilled, who's happier?
Yes.
Right? And I realized that actually the ones who are the happiest are usually the ones that haven't got the biggest numbers, aren't, perhaps doing the most.
Yeah.
But they're just kind of doing what is meaningful to them.
Yes.
And I think a good example of a creator who's just done everything solo is Casey Neistat.
Oh yes,
right?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, he just does everything by himself, And so I've kind of gone down this approach of just trying to do it by myself. And I think, yeah, so far it seems to be working. Thankfully, like I'm not putting videos out as much as I'd like to, but thankfully the videos have been doing well. So yeah.
And I'm sure it comes across in the way you talk to the treatment, right? Because I think that's the key. As listeners, you're like, I think they're faking it, right? Or like, I don't think they're really into it. You can get that sense.
Yeah.
Right. And no matter if you are like a YouTuber, or even like in the corporate world or whatnot, right? When you're presenting, when you're speaking, in my line of work, right? If I don't present in a way that's not true to who I am, like people can sense it, right? And there's so many different woven aspects to it.
Yeah.
It might not be like views on my end, but it might be like reactions or a way to move projects along, right?
Yeah.
And I think when we're ourselves, when you're not true to who we are, that core, my God, there's so many parallels here.
Oh my goodness, yeah, you're so right. You know, actually recently, doing this TED Talk, it wasn't really something that I don't think it made a lot of logical sense in terms of the amount of time that I put into it versus how much, you know, exposure or, you know, this and that someone might want to do a TED Talk for. But the biggest reason that I actually chose to do it was to face my fear of being vulnerable. Just speaking like that and just being on a stage and doing something that absolutely terrifies me, I realized that as a person, if I want to become better, like I need to be able to face my fear of judgment.
Yes.
And, you know, kind of just being there in front of, you know, the possibility that something could go wrong. You know, these things are very scary, but I'm realizing now with the rise of AI and, you know, what I do on YouTube, people more and more just crave authenticity.
Yeah.
Right? AI is so easy to create something absolutely beautiful through AI, but the one thing that it lacks is the human touch.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to see that more and more, that the human touch of just connecting with someone in a very real and genuine way, through, even if it's through a screen, it's like you can still feel it, right? When someone's being their true selves. And so that's something I think as well I'm really trying to work on, is like, how can I be more authentic and a little kind of bring across a bit more of my personality through my videos, which is something that I've been very scared to do.
Really, eh?
Yeah, for the longest time. I'm naturally very shy, but just I think pushing through it is like eventually, I don't know.
That's amazing. I mean, I think I resonate with that a lot too. And these are two real images, two real voices, not AI voices, or they might be. Sorry, listeners. But I think I will drop a link to the TED Talk in the description as well too. But I think what I liked about it is that when you actually share that story with your dad, I'm like, oh, okay, like I'm drawn in now, right? I'm even more invested to like talk to dad. I mean, I always have been, but like after her, like, oh, I'm excited to go into this. I'm excited to like pull that thread there, right? And to like get to like understand that a bit more because, you know, for myself, like my father passed away shortly after my daughter was born, right? So later in the process, but still, like there's that loss, like you still have those memories, you're just thinking about it. And now, you know, as my daughter is like about to be 4 as well too, right? It's like I keep thinking like, what was my dad like when I was 4, right? What was he going through? And it's like, it's just so interesting, these parallels. I feel like, man, fatherhood changes us.
Yeah, really.
If I could pivot just to like the last question here, you know, what is it that you're excited about in this like next chapter of fatherhood for you?
That's a good question. I think definitely I'm looking forward to having more children. We'd like to have more kids for sure. When that time comes, I don't know. But yeah, I think experiencing family in a way that I never really got to experience it growing up, because I grew up in such a small family. But now having my little girl and seeing her with her cousins and her aunties and uncles and seeing her grow up, I think I'm going to get an immense amount of fulfillment seeing her enjoy the things that I didn't get to enjoy. And just, yeah, I don't know. I think just growing as a person, it's like every day is wonderful. And I don't think that I'm particularly excited for any particular stage, but right now, it's like, I think, yeah, just being grateful for what I have, and yeah, just family is yeah, it's incredible. It's always so hard. It sounds so cliche, doesn't it? But
Yeah.
parenthood is really the best thing in the world.
Because you earlier talked about your unspoken truth of being sacrificed, right? But then the sacrifice is actually leading to us fulfillment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very bizarre. It's very bizarre. That's the way we were made.
Amazing. Well, we'll close it out officially here. Daniel, thank you so much for being on Two Dads, One Car. I'll drop you off in just a bit, and then we'll do a debrief after this. So awesome. Thanks for being on.
Steven. Thank you.
All right, that's a wrap. Thank you so much, Daniel, for being on the show. It's such a blast chatting with you. I have a lot of takeaways from the discussion. And more importantly, it was really neat to get the perspective of someone who is a full-on YouTuber. I think it's 500,000+ subscribers. And the ability to create and balance that creative work with being a father, I think what's really interesting, and I think it is possible, is that he just has very carved out dedicated time to focus on his craft. And then at 3:30, when he picks up his daughter, it is full on father mode. And so it's just so nice and refreshing to get that perspective. Because sometimes you don't know, like, how to interweave these possibilities in their lives. And so Daniel is such a great, shining example of that. I asked my wife if she wanted to be part of the debrief. She's like, I'm okay. But here's my wife for recommending Daniel to be on the show, because it was such a fun conversation. I'm looking forward to building our friendship even more. And you might see him again in future videos. Who knows? But with that, thank you all so much for listening in. Follow us on Spotify, on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts. Follow me on LinkedIn as well. I'd love to connect with you one-on-one. And feel free to comment on the episode on Spotify. Let me know what you think. I think Daniel shared a lot about his personal experiences growing up with his mother, and also his dad passed away pretty early in his life. And things that he doesn't normally share in his normal YouTube channel. So I'd love to get your perspective on what you thought. I thought it was fantastic. Daniel, showing this side of you. I think it's going to change all our lives in a great way. And so with that, cheers everybody. Have a great day. And a great day here in Vancouver. I'm going to go to Home Depot to pick up some stuff, because that is what family life is like. And this is not sponsored by Home Depot, but it could be actually. So if you work at Home Depot, send me a note. Let's have a sponsorship. All jokes aside, with that, we'll end up this debrief. Thank you all so much. Take care. Have a great day. Bye.